I'd like to introduce the panel. I'll let them introduce themselves. So we'll start with Martin, and then we'll move on.
Good afternoon, responsible gambling diehards. I appreciate it's Friday afternoon, so thanks for sticking around. My job title is correct. It's dubiously glamorous and definitely way too long. My name is Martin Lycka, and I look after Entain's regulatory affairs and responsible gambling matters through the Americas, including in the States. And I am a subscriber to Scott's newsletter. It's great, so you should all do that. And thanks for having me.
Thank you. Christopher, are you a subscriber? No, sorry.
I will be after this panel.
Yeah, thank you. That's good.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christopher Hebert. I'm the director of the gaming division for the Louisiana Attorney General's office. And as it relates to responsible gambling, I also started a program called the Problem Gambling Resource Services Program in our state. Our sole purpose is to educate our citizens about the free services that our state provides for problem gamblers and their families.
Cait? Yeah.
Subscriber, and I mandate all of my new employees also subscribe. And I have the longest title on here. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Communications and Responsibility at the American Gaming Association. I've been there for about 3 years and lead all of our RG efforts working with colleagues on stage here.
And Adam, finally. Yes.
Adam Warrington, hello, good afternoon. I'm the Vice President of Responsible Gaming for FanDuel Group.
And I think we've got, there we have Tracy.
Hi, Tracy.
Would you introduce yourself to this audience, please, Tracy?
Thank you very much. My name is Tracy Parker, and I'm Director of Standards and Accreditation with the Responsible Gambling Council. And I'm coming to you live from Toronto, Ontario.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Right, let's kick off. Cait, I thought we'd start with like a bit of a background on the situation with regard to responsible gambling and where responsibility lies for responsible gambling in terms of state versus federal.
Sure. So it's actually a short answer. There's no federal government rules around sports betting, casino gaming, iGaming in terms of responsibility. It lies within the states, and it creates a unique kind of framework for operators because it allows each state to decide what works for them, but then each operator has to abide by rules from the many jurisdictions that offer sports betting and iGaming, whether online or in retail. So it can create, progress in that some states can push the regulations forward, but it also creates a lot of different rules, and I'm sure makes things sometimes arduous for Adam and Martin and their teams as they kind of present responsible gaming to their customers. But going beyond that, I think what's more important as we work towards, a bigger market that we have today is responsibility isn't just up to operators or regulators. It's up to sports teams and leagues. It's up to media. It's up to anybody who has a vested interest in sports betting and iGaming. And so that's one of the things the AGA is focused on, bringing education to these, new partners in this growing field is, if you're making money off of this industry, you have a responsibility for responsibility.
Yeah. To help, what are the practical steps that the AGA has taken, particularly with regard to the growth of sports betting? And I guess that has brought this issue into focus more than it was previously.
Sure. So the AGA has had a leadership role with responsible gaming in this industry for decades, as long as we've been around. And that starts, back to 1990s when we helped found then NCRG, now ICRG. But in the last 4 years since PASPA was overturned, I think, what we've seen is the AGA's role has been to set a standard and a high standard because we see what's happened in other markets and we want to get ahead of that, but we want to do it in a way that benefits, creating a thriving industry that can compete with illegal offshore operators and bookies, but protects customers. So out of the gate, we updated our responsible code of conduct for our members. We worked with our membership on the responsible marketing code for sports wagering, and then more recently, one of the things we've been building and working with is our Have a Game Plan, Bet Responsibly campaign, and that's in large part consumer education, and it touches on a number of things. How to keep this entertainment, how to find legal regulated operators, how to know the difference, and how to get the resources you need if you are someone who needs help. And so our role has been both raising the standards and visibility of responsibility, but also telling the story about what the industry is doing and the value of, these responsible gaming programs to the industry and things like advertising. There's a lot of conversations about advertising. Is there too much? Is it impacting customers and the public in a negative way? But advertising is really crucial to building a sustainable legal market. Our research shows that a lot of people don't realize they're betting with offshore providers, and if we're not, having the opportunity to educate and bring customers into our products, then we're not going to get very far there, and there's no protections with illegal offshore operators. So
yeah. I mean, you mentioned advertising, and I'll turn to you, Martin, despite the fact you're now in Jersey City, as you told me earlier. But I'm going to drag you back to Europe just briefly.
Hopefully not literally.
Not quite literally, no. But could you give us something of an overview for those who aren't kind of aware of how this issue has developed in Europe, certainly in certain jurisdictions, certainly in the UK. Cait's mentioned advertising. Advertising is a particularly hot topic when it comes to UK right now, what we think, and also in other jurisdictions in Europe. I think Spain, Portugal. Maybe not Portugal, certainly Germany. So could you give an overview of what's been going on, and how do you think the industry has evolved its stance with regard to some of these issues?
Thanks, I'd be happy to. First of all, let me take an issue with the title of the panel, though, because we all have, it's fair to say. And perhaps that's what has brought you here. Houston, we have a problem. And yes, there is a problem to address, but as Cait has as always, very ably and pertinently started demonstrating, we're all looking into solutions, and we've started putting them in place, including here in the United States. And still going slightly off tangent, so what drives me nuts, to give you an example, Colorado, just fair play to them, they just happen to have introduced a massive responsible gambling fund, put $3 million behind it. But sadly, and that's why I believe we need to be moving on from talking about just the problem to talking about the solution across the piece. I will come back to the European question. But still, the so-called responsible gambling advocates would start picking holes and go, but it's approved. It's been approved only for a year. So, yeah, but it's a great start. And it's, as Cait and I discussed yesterday, it's not as though Colorado was going to do away with it. So I'll come to your question, but really I'm trying to illustrate the point that there are great programs such as Have a Game Plan, and Entain's done arguably a ton of stuff, including in this country, that focuses on the solution with a view to creating a sustainable market that is addressing the problem. That's why I reckon we've all had an issue with the title, but we will enjoy ourselves regardless. Indeed, when it comes to Europe, I think it's fair to say, and hopefully I'm in a position to say that. I'm still very new to America. I'm learning. I have my stupid European accent, as you can tell.
Sounds better than the New Jersey accent, let's face it. So,
yeah, it's been all over the place. But in Europe, I reckon, to be brutally candid, the industry, especially in the UK, but also in Spain, a few other jurisdictions, unfortunately, we were way too late to have reacted to the shift in people's hearts and minds when it comes to excessive advertising. It can't be the case that every single advert would be a sports betting advert. But then, in the last 3 to 4 years, the industry has realized that, and arguably, we've done loads to address that issue. Let's see how the ongoing review of the UK Gambling Act pans out. There are bound to be restrictions, but I truly believe that they won't be as draconian as they would have been had the industry ignored the public and the developments. And the same goes largely, to your point, Scott, the same goes largely for Spain, although that one's probably very likely down to the sitting leftist government. So we do need to, as an industry, and that's the key message, work together, address these issues together. And that's why this country, you can see Paul Burns, also the likes of Ontario, the rest of the rest of Canada, have all a huge opportunity to become leaders in this space, and that's my wet dream. But perhaps we could create this two-way traffic between the Americas and Europe when it comes to responsible gambling.
Just going to move my chair a bit away. Adam, So you're at a company which has a foot in both camps, obviously, effectively. Your parent is, European, has a lot of experience in this area. FanDuel is a big name. Responsible gambling is presumably at the heart of your proposition, or that's at the heart of what you're going to be telling the public. How do you ensure within the company that it's understood about, but there must be a lot of pressure within FanDuel to go for growth, marketing, customer services, and it's all about the product. But how do you ensure that the people at the front line of this understand where responsible gambling comes into the picture, and how do you ensure that it's not just that you're saying it at a top corporate level about have a game plan? It's about ensuring that there's a company culture about this.
Yeah, so I joined the company in this industry last fall, so I'm a bit of a newbie, just about 7 months in. Previously, I worked in the beer industry for over a decade, so I led all of Anheuser-Busch's responsible drinking work. There's a level of parallel. When this opportunity came up, when I was talking to our leadership team, it struck me how important RG, or SG, as we'd call it in Europe, is to the ethos of the company and the growth plan, the business agenda from our CEO, Amy Howe, on down. And it's not lip service. And in those 7 months have been proven to me. So one thing we did this year at FanDuel was we tied RG to our company bonus metric. So over 10% of our bonus this year for all of our colleagues is tied to RG. So if we achieve it, it's more money in our pockets. If we don't, it's less money in our pockets. Part of that's in training, right? So we went in this March during Problem Gambling Awareness Month, and we'll do a lot this September during the AGA's RG Month as well. We had a mandatory all-employee training, and we had a stretch target of 100% completion, which we hit that stretch target. Every employee at FanDuel was employee in the month of March completed the training for everyone down. We have to start inside to go external. There's a lot we want to do in terms of education. I come from an industry that relies heavily on advertising. I'm a big believer in advertising in terms of education when it comes to social impact. We don't let consumers, both existing and future consumers in states that we might operate in the future, know what we stand for the RG tools we have. They're coming a little bit blind. It's our responsibility to do that. So whether you're working in one of our retail establishments, you're on our commercial team, or on our RG team, it's the center of everything we do, and we all have a responsibility. And that buy-in's coming from the top, and it's been amazing.
But there's quite an interesting debate in the UK around whether gambling is heading towards being overseen in a way that alcohol is, which is a relatively liberal approach to alcohol and alcohol advertising, and certainly drink-aware kind of campaigns, or whether it's tobacco, in which case people are trying to say no completely. So do you think that the US operators, especially the sports bettors, do you think they're on the path to having that kind of, it'll be the alcohol approach, it'll be a relatively liberal approach to what they say in their advertising, and the bet responsible campaigns will be the ones that will be leading the way there?
We have a choice here, all the operators in this country, and all the operators who work in this area are talking about this. There's a tobacco path and there's an alcohol path. And do we want to regulate ourselves and have guidelines and standards we all abide to and keep each other to, or will others come and do that for us? Of course, there are regulators in all the states we legally operate in, and we abide by those regulations. But we have a choice when we look 3, 5, 10, 20 years in the future. We can take the lessons from Europe in this industry, and we can take the lessons in this country, in North America in particular, from alcohol and tobacco. If we don't put dedicated dollars to education, if we don't practice what we're preaching, if we're not hiring the right people, if we're not living this day in, day out, it's going to hurt all of us, every operator in this country, and we all have to abide by those standards, and when AGA, et cetera, helping us lead the way.
Yeah. Christopher, it's interesting that obviously you're the one that kind of gets at the state level, you're seeing this is where gambling hits the consumer. You're seeing that's part of your job, is to understand the relationship there between your operators and their consumers in your state. Is there a uniformity of approach when it comes to regulators across different states? Is there lessons that you learn from each individual state, or are you somebody said it about reinventing the wheel when it comes to regulations? Is that something that you're trying to avoid?
Good question. And I think in certain areas there's uniformity, in others there is none. I'll start off where I think there is no uniformity, and that's in resources that are dedicated. You're all over the place in the state. I'm happy to say that Louisiana, but for the resources that we have in our state, I could not have started our program in our Attorney General's office. I'm not aware of another similar program. We have, 10 outpatient treatment centers in our state that are strategically placed. What I'm very proud of is the work that our Louisiana Association of Compulsive Gambling does. There's a center, a 21-bed residential center called CORE that we have in our state. And, you know, we have $1.5 million that was dedicated to responsible gaming and problem gambling prior to sports wagering coming on. Our legislators, you know, had the foresight to add an additional minimum $500,000 or 2% of revenue, whichever is greater. And I'm pretty confident that that 2% is what we're going to end up with. That's going to continue to help us to develop programs in the area of responsible gaming and problem gaming. I do believe that there is a general uniformity in approach. And I think a lot of that is because of national organizations such as NCPG, where we have 37 of our states, to my knowledge, have affiliate councils. I do know that there is a lot of information sharing between those states. Those states have monthly meetings. They share treatment programs and the like. And I do know that states like Pennsylvania, just from talking to our head of our affiliate, we do confer with states like Pennsylvania, Nevada, and the other 34 affiliates, so that we can have a sense of uniformity. I think a great example of that we're seeing now, and something that definitely impacts the operator, is the movement towards one national hotline number, so that the operator is relieved from having to keep up with, and you see it in the advertisements. I mean, the responsible gaming portion is sometimes longer than the actual advertisement.
New York on top.
Exactly. So I think there's uniformity in that sense. I think the states are doing a good job of communicating.
Okay.
I would just add to that, something that's unique about this space is that whether you're a regulator or an advocate or an operator or, the industry, organization, everybody wants to do more and do better and work together to get there. And I think, figuring out, where those commonalities and consensus are, that's, the sweet spot. And you talk about the helpline, that's something that the industry came together, came out about last year and said, we want this, and it's not just so that our marketers can have one line on an advertisement. It's so that consumers, when they're at a point where they say, I really need help, let me read that small font so I can get the number to call. They can just pick one number there, and it's going to get them to the resources. But when in doing that, you have to make sure that the resource that's provided is funded and effective and has the ability to connect them with the services they need. And so I think the collaboration that we've seen as the industry has expanded is probably the most meaningful change, that everyone's committed to this and committed to doing it together. It's just a matter of, making sure that we're not letting our own egos or territory get in the way of progress on behalf of, consumers and players.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And we have to remember that regulations are minimum requirements. And I think it's incumbent sometimes on the regulator to actually reach out to operators. We've been fortunate in Louisiana. We've already had 2 operators to reach out, and we're doing 2 separate collaborative efforts. One of the operators entered into a partnership with our flagship university. And so our collaboration there is geared more towards students and ensuring that underage individuals aren't going to game. But we are also entering into another partnership with a separate operator where they are going to allow us to use their platform to advertise, which I think is excellent. So I'd like to see a lot more of that happen as well.
Tracy, I'd like to bring you into the conversation, if that's possible. There's a lot of chat here about how the operators are making best efforts. From your point of view, do you think that's true? Do you think they are making best efforts? And second of all, is there more that you think that they can do that you're lobbying for or talking to them about?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a very interesting discussion. I think there's obviously more that can be done, and certainly a lot of the issues we've talked about sort of highlight the needs for monitoring, research, and enforcement. I come back to thank you, Martin, for raising the issues around the title. My questions around that was that if we focus only on problem gambling, we're missing a lot of opportunity and a lot of really good work that you heard Adam talk about in terms of the player education piece, sort of the upstream prevention work that needs to be done. So I think that broadening the conversation as opposed to, and we don't have to choose between talking about responsible gambling or problem gambling, support or mitigation. Right? We're very creative as an industry. There is the opportunity to do it all, and there's certainly the need to do it all. But to Cait's point, that can be achieved really only in those sort of in the most effective way with collaboration. There is a very large ecosystem in this that involves both the players and the operators, the affiliates, our payment service providers, our broadcasters, any kind of content providers. And it's that kind of collaboration that we certainly advocate for, and bringing all sides together. Cait mentioned, dropping ego and assumptions and those kinds of things in order to come together for the right reasons and to move things forward. And that's certainly something that we can do. I think that's one of the biggest advantages out of a regulated market, is that, it does bring people together, not just for the monitoring and enforcement piece, but also to finding those creative solutions that we need to sort of tackle the issues that we're talking about.
I'm interested because I come from the UK perspective, and Martin knows this well, is that the extent to which issues around responsible gambling and problem gambling can be a real political issue. Mm-hmm. That you've got a lobby, an anti-lobby, an anti-gambling lobby, effectively in the UK, which are wielding quite a lot of influence right now. Is that how much of responsible gambling, Cait, is it a political issue at any level in the US?
It is hard because the dynamic in the US is so different, just in how we consider business. Where the individual freedom of people to opt into things or play or not play creates a different setting. I think I was telling Adam this the other day. This is the first position I've had where there's kind of a counter. I'm a communications person, and I also do responsibility, and this is the first position I've had in my career where there's a counterpoint, really. I used to work on things like children's heart health, and no one's going to be like, actually. And so it's been interesting to me because, there's an opposite side of the story, and it's an important one, but it's not one that the industry is trying to perpetuate. It's not as if, people are sitting in rooms and offices and buildings and saying, how can we take advantage of these people? We will inherently, by having this business, you need to build it in a sustainable way. And so I think it's often, when you look at the headlines around, anything over the last year that touches on problem gambling, I think sometimes it can be unfair that it's an us versus them in terms of what the industry is trying to do. The industry wants a responsible gaming forward environment. We want to build this so that we all have jobs for years to come and have, it can provide entertainment. That's what this is. And so I think, there's always going to be friction points. I have a really great relationship with Keith White at NCPG, which most people might think is odd. But we collaborate on a lot of things, and then we have an honest relationship around, this is your point of view and this is our point of view, and that might not always come together, but let's find the places we can come together and move that forward. So it's a unique dynamic, but I think one that benefits, the end game here.
And how much is responsible gambling tied up with issues around integrity in the US? That seems to be a stronger link here than it is, I think, Martin, you'd probably say it's not a particularly strong link between those two in European terms.
I would say not as strong as hair meaning throughout the North America at this stage, and of course with Brazil, fingers crossed, coming on board in the foreseeable future. I reckon it will be very, very similar. But I believe that the root cause of that is, at the risk of stating the obvious, the heavy involvement of the major leagues and other sports, despite having been ferociously opposed to the idea of regulating or legalizing sports betting for years. Then fair play to them again. They've seen sense and drifted from the dark side to the bright side. So I believe that's what it comes down to. So to answer your question, it comes hand in hand. I believe we're all trying to provide to our customers not only the shiniest, flashiest, the most exciting offering, but also the safest one. And especially when it comes to the younger generations, people much younger than I am these days, because they do care. I'm not saying that I wouldn't care, but the young folks, they care even more about the ethos of the companies they do business with. And that's why consumer protection, including responsible gambling, is so important. I can't agree more. Responsible gambling is not meant to be about competition. If our respective, looking at Adam in particular, if our respective marketing and commercial people are at each other's throats, yes, that's their job, but we've been happily working together because both companies have realized, and other AJ members have realized, that we do need to come together and make sure that we're still here 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. We can't afford for our customers to just burn out. So the time of milking the cash cows is over.
Yeah. Christopher, in Louisiana, is there what's the political situation with regard to responsible gambling? Is there an understanding of the issues in terms of legislators, or not? And what are the fears of what from your point of view would be the biggest problems that might occur when it comes to regulated sports betting?
I think, number one, you bring up a good point about educating our legislators. I think we do have some work to do in that area. As many as that we can get to conferences such as Nickel G's and those types of things. It'll go a long way to educating them, because at the end of the day, they are the ones who are passing these laws that we all have to live by. And so it's very important that they stay up to speed on what is actually going on out there. There are opportunities to learn. Look, we're going to have hiccups in the different jurisdictions. It's important that as we come online, a perfect example is what we're talking about with advertising. And, the word that you keep hearing is oversaturation. And so, our office had to quickly respond to complaints that we were getting. We currently have a rule that's going through the promulgation process now as it relates to advertising. And what we did was looked at all of the jurisdictions that had sports wagering, and we actually borrowed, if you will, New York's regulations as it related, because we thought they were robust enough and got the job done. We were lucky, I'm going to say, in the sense that we were not one of the first states to pass sports wagering, because it gave us an opportunity from a responsible gaming and problem gaming standpoint to kind of understand what was going on. I think one of the examples of that is when our neighboring states started to pass sports wagering, and our problem gambling hotline saw an uptick in calls. Right. Now, of course, some of those calls, ironically enough, as it related to mobile wagering, were people calling to see if they could get some assistance in getting their app up and running. So we politely told those people that's not what we were there for, and then we moved on.
Yeah, I've got a problem gambling. Right. I just can't get that one.
Yeah, that's right.
85% or something of helpline calls.
But what that did for us, though, was when Louisiana did finally pass sports wagering, we were prepared to deal with some of those issues. So I think it's just important for all of the jurisdictions to learn from one another.
So when you're saying you're getting some responses from people about advertising, is that genuine? Do you think there's a rumbling of discontent amongst a certain amount of people around the amount of advertising?
Absolutely. In our state, it was particularly the TV advertising during football games, and also social media. I know that Facebook posts, you couldn't go 2 or 3 posts without seeing an ad. I get it. As operators are competing for market share, I certainly understand it. But I work in the industry. Those who don't did not necessarily understand or appreciate the volume of advertising. And so I think, and I think we as regulators have a responsibility to respond to that.
It's also
That's okay.
It's a hard thing to regulate.
Yes.
Like, because it's not FanDuel's ads and, and BetMGM's ads. It's not any individual, it's a collective. And
Right.
how do you, it's a hard thing to regulate, but it's something
Yeah.
that,
And
is important to-
is it actually something that might be self-regulating because of
Natural market forces.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
what we know?
It's
Yeah.
very expensive to advertise
That's right.
during
What we
NFL
know
games.
from
So
yeah.
every operator will not continue,
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
frank.
Right.
You will not see that as more and more states become legal and grow.
Yeah,
And I hopefully Chris agrees as well. So natural forces will address at least some of that issue.
Yeah. And what's but that is a problem if you just pin your hope on that, is it? Do you think that there has to be some kind of nudge somewhere?
I think there is a few things at play. The self-regulation part already, the kind of self-moderation part already happened. You saw it come down. Are we going to see a blip at the beginning of the NFL season this year? I'm sure. Are you going to see a blip when if anything happens in California or Florida or Texas, any of those states? Yes, it's going to go up in those markets. But I think a few things will happen. Americans are just going to get used to it. Think of, the last 20 years in any new industry that's come up, whether it's, .coms or, quick investments. There's going to be a new thing that gets the ire of press and policymakers. And so we just get a little more used to seeing it. There is a self-regulation process the AJ established shortly after in 2018. But we're talking with broadcasters and teams and leagues about expanding that to also include responsibilities for those entities. They all play a role in this. The leagues, some of them have been more forward in setting limits in terms of how many ads per game or the type of advertising that can happen. And broadcasters, they could probably be more transparent about how much advertising there is. And so we're in conversations with how can we evolve this so that is holistic for the industry and better represents, better protects us for the long run, to be honest.
And if I may, I do believe it will settle down because the novelty factor is bound to bear out. Yeah, there will be the next thing, or the markets will get saturated. The operators will get their customers in and they will start catering to the customers, and I suppose also the regulators, because now everybody's madly busy scrambling from one state or another to another. You guys, you need to cater to the needs of all the new operators entering Louisiana in your case. But then a year from now, when the honeymoon period's over, if you will, I'm sure you will have a time to sit down and pause and think, unless online casino bonanza kicks off, although it doesn't look that way. And you'll start dealing with even more sophisticated concepts.
Right.
Like responsible gambling, the wider consumer protection, and put in restrictions on advertising. Plus, just like in the UK, to your initial point, these folks, well, they're in the industry, but outside of this building, they will get even more fed up with seeing all those ads, gambling ads during Super Bowl and the Masters and what have you.
One last word from you, Tracy. Do you think is it too complacent to rely on a self-writing mechanism around advertising when it comes to gambling?
I definitely think there's a need for both. There's certainly minimum standards, and we see that in most jurisdictions with content restrictions in terms of, not promoting certain types of behavior within those ads, risky types of behavior, not targeting vulnerable populations such as youth. So there's certainly a baseline standard that certainly can be followed. You see in different jurisdictions where it hasn't been self-regulated and what can happen in terms of restrictions to, ads at certain times of day or different types of where locations for those different types of ads and that kind of thing. So we know what happens when there isn't an approach to self-regulation. I think the frequency and the quantity that we see also, links back to Adam's point before about the need for balance in those ads in terms of the behaviors, and can we use some of that time, some of that sophistication in that messaging to promote safer play. And safer play habits and to educate players and to provide information on the tools that are available to them to use and to keep play safe. So I think there is a lot of opportunity, and typically there's always sort of a need for both carrots and sticks that that certainly the industry will figure out.
Okay, thank you. If there's any questions, are we, yeah, okay.
I think many of us have probably seen advertisements for one lucky bettor return small bet into a great parlay and $12 is their problem. Do you foresee more responsibility and transparency in offsetting that by saying, here are the total number of parlays and here's how, for this period of time, all users are playing, so it's not just the pie in the sky that's kind of shown to customers?
So I'm going to answer that question not directly. What we did at FanDuel was we had a national ad that started in March, we're still using, which we call the system, which is all focused on RG tools. It's one gentleman educating another on how he uses tools throughout his betting experience. Right? So we're looking to educate that. That ran 6,000 times in the month of March at a national and regional level. So we can do more. We want to do more. Our marketing organization is committed to do more as well. We need to educate about guardrails and how you do that, especially as we enter new states where you're going to have consumers who have no understanding of gambling, what is a parlay? How do you explain that? What's a wager limit? What's a time limit? What's a deposit limit? How do we kind of do that? So we need not to showcase this fancy scenario. I totally agree with that. How do we educate about tools for a sustainable entertainment experience? This is meant to be entertainment. It's not meant to be a way to get rich.
Yep.
Right, if there's anyone else, any questions? I think we're out of time. The went to 0 a while ago. So, Tracy, thank you very much. Martin, Christopher, Cait, and Adam, thank you.